Hey everybody, Scott Straub here, and in this short video, I would like to talk about how to get over your fear of speaking in front of other humans, public speaking tips. And I suppose what makes me an expert, quote unquote, is that, well, I've been a teacher for nearly 20 years, K through 12, I taught a couple different grades, and now I teach at the college level, and I also do workshops and seminars around the country. But before that time, I was the most timid, shy, scared human that has ever been created. In fact, talking to one person, I was kind of nervous, but if there were more than one, forget about it. I was literally nearly peeing my pants. And if there was a girl in the room, totally forget about it. I couldn't even breathe. I was so nervous. In fact, in my early 20s, I went skydiving, and it was the first and last time I ever went, and my chute was all tangled. I did something called advanced free fall, where you jump out of the plane by yourself and a few people jump out with you and watch you hurl to your death. Or I survived, actually, obviously. But I will tell you that experience wasn't nearly as horrifying as getting up in front of people and speaking. So let me tell you about a few things that I did to get over my fear. Well, first and foremost, practice, practice, practice. I know people say that. You're like, yeah. But let me tell you what I did specifically. What I would do is the very first time I took a public speaking class, and I was terrified that I was going to have to do my first speech. And what I did was I was working in a place that had a back room, and they had a 55-gallon drum there, and they had a video camera. I borrowed a video camera, waited until everybody else went home. I set it up. It was a big clunky one. It was before cell phones. And I videotaped myself, big VHS tape, and I went through my speech. And when I watched it, I literally had to watch it like this, and I was so incredibly terrible. Like, dude, like, and I was moving, and it was just pitiful. Well, you know what? I did it again, and it was still really bad, but it wasn't as bad as the first time. I did it for an hour or an hour and a half. I think the whole speech was about 10 minutes. And sure enough, by the 8th or 9th or 10th time, I wasn't bad. I certainly wasn't professional. And when I went to do it, I got an A on it, and they said, yeah, that was pretty good. Room for improvement, duh. But that's how I survived my first public speaking event. Well, the first event where I wasn't terrible. The second thing that I started doing after that was accepting every opportunity to speak. You see, I was a geologist at the time, and the reason why I chose geology was because I really wanted to be a teacher, but I was so chicken. I was so scared of speaking in front of humans. I did this subconsciously. I chose the profession that was about as opposite from teaching as anything could be, which was being a geologist. My whole dream was to be away from humans and be up on top of a mountain or in a valley, sampling and putting things in jars and doing things like that. That's what I did for about 5 years. And I finally said, you know what? I need to get over this. So in addition to taking the public speaking class, I accepted every opportunity to speak. My buddy taught second and third grade, and he invited me in. And the first time he said, listen, just do 5 minutes, a little science lesson. And the 5 minutes turned into 15. And you know what? Went pretty good. And those kids were cool anyway. And then I did it again and again. And then I went to an older class. And then I was also a whitewater rafting guide. I was a kayak guide. And there was a first aid course, a course for being a first aid instructor. And I took it knowing that some of the classes were small, some were big. And the first class was something like 4 or 5 people, and I co-taught it. And sure enough, I was pretty nervous actually, but the person I was with was really kind. They gave me a few little pieces here and there. And then I did that several times, and I ran my own class, and I got in front of bigger classes. And that's how I got to be, that's where I had the confidence enough to go into a teaching program and start teaching. A couple other little tips on the day. Now, these are survival tips. They're advanced speaking tips, and I'm not talking about that. If you have an opportunity to get to that location early and do it, absolutely do it. Now, if it's a class you normally go to, you may not be able to get there because you only have 4 minutes in between class. But if you can get there early and set up, that'll help alleviate your fears. I always try to talk to audience members. Now I talk all around the country. And if possible, I try to talk to audience members to try to ease my fears and get to have them get to know me and I get to know them. And then when I start speaking, I have a slightly closer connection to the audience. Remind yourself to pause. Now, I use PowerPoints a lot, but that's certainly not the only way to speak. There's different ways, note cards and memory and everything else. But literally, every 3 or 4 slides in my PowerPoint, there'd be a slide that says any questions. And the reason why I do that is because sometimes the audience needs a break from you speaking because we tend to speak too rapidly, like I'm doing here. So I'm trying to condense everything into about 5 or 6 minutes. But it reminds me to pause and just shut up and be quiet for a second. And then when I start going faster and faster, and then I see the slide that says any questions, and then I have to remind myself to slow down. Now, this is where it gets a little bit more advanced. The first step is just surviving a public speaking event, speaking in front of humans. And then you want to start throwing in some of the advanced techniques, which the great speakers do, like looking around the room casually, not. And the way I started getting my eyes to move around the room was I took little Post-it notes. I used orange or whatever color I had, and I stuck them on the side wall, the back wall, and then the other side wall on the right. And I would remind myself, hey, take a look at the Post-it notes, and it'd be right above their head. I don't think anyone ever noticed me doing that, but even if they did, who cares? And it would help force my memory or remind me to look left, right for a little while, and then center. Slowly, of course. And that helped me start getting that public speaking experience and how to look around the room. 1 or 2 quick little last tips here. If you make a mistake, train yourself not to apologize. That's one of the worst things a speaker can do. But it's easy to do that. I apologize all the time. I'm so sorry. But don't try not to do that. And then lastly, this is a tip for survival. It's not always the best speaking tip. If you take a public speaking class, they might say, oh, don't hand anything out. Well, listen, in the beginning, you're just trying to survive. So what I would always do is I would tell them, I would always have a handout of my speech or whatever I'm talking about. And number 1, that helps the audience relax a little bit because they don't have to write everything down. And then number 2, it takes a whole bunch of eyes off of me so I can not feel quite so pressured. So I'm here to tell you, if you're scared to talk in front of humans, I understand because that was me, but you can definitely overcome your fears and get better. I'm not saying you can be Tony Robbins or whoever's great, but you can certainly improve. If I did it, anybody can improve.